Welcome to the day. We begin with the unfolding humanitarian crisis in Sudan and the brutal civil war that is tearing the country apart. The UN is warning of imminent famine and says more than 10 million people have been displaced after more than a year of fighting. The power struggle between the Sudanese army and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces is now focused on the city of al-Fasher, the army's last stronghold in the Darfur region. The International Criminal Court's chief prosecutor is now urgently investigating allegations of war crimes and crimes against humanity being committed across the region. More than 1 million people are thought to be sheltering in and around al-Fasher, many in displacement camps where there are warnings of an impending famine. RSF's siege on the city is also threatening access to drinking water for hundreds of thousands of people. On Thursday, the UN Security Council adopted a resolution demanding that the RSF end its assault.
The Council demands that the Rapid Support Forces immediately stop the siege of al-Fasher and that all sides step back from the brink. An attack on the city would be catastrophic for the 1.5 million people sheltering in the city. We tabled this resolution to help secure a localised ceasefire around al-Fasher and create the wider conditions to support de-escalation across the country and ultimately save lives.
And joining us now from Connecticut in the US is Nathaniel Raymond. He's the director of the Humanitarian Research Lab at Yale School of Public Health. Thanks for joining us. You have recently carried out an investigation into the latest fighting around al-Fasher. What have you found out?
What we found, Gerhard, is that approximately the better part of a quarter of the city has been burned to the ground. That's over more than 200 European FIFA standard football pitches of houses have been destroyed, primarily by Rapid Support Forces, but also by Sudan Armed Forces bombardment. Additionally, nearly 50 villages in and around al-Fasher proper have been attacked by Rapid Support Forces, we believe, with arson attacks. Tens, if not hundreds of thousands of al-Fasher's more than 2.8 million residents, almost the population of Brooklyn, New York, have fled. We are seeing traffic jams to the south, into the west of people fleeing, and new internally displaced persons camps popping up outside and inside the city.
Now, if I understand the report correctly, you also found hints that this conflict could be part of a wider proxy war.
The UN panel of experts, Gerhard, had identified a what's called an IL-76 cargo plane known as an Ilyushin NATO call sign Candid on a strip at a base in Chad. That panel of experts report didn't identify the plane per se. They identified the base, but later additional experts identified imagery at that UN-identified base that showed that transport plane. We identified a transport plane consistent with that Ilyushin 76 around al-Fasher on June 11th. But I want to be clear here, we have not yet identified publicly who is operating that plane. As soon as we will release that publicly. But someone was flying a cargo transport consistent with that seen in Chad at a RSF resupply base.
Now, the UN Security Council is calling for the siege of on al-Fasher to end. How likely is that?
At this point, UN Resolution 2736 is a major step forward, but there are no specific consequences laid out in the resolution. The past few days in al-Fasher, from what we can observe, has been calm. There has not been additional damage since 2736 was passed at scale. Now, the question is the Rapid Support Forces reloading? Are they reconsidering their attack? Is this a pause? Is this a ceasefire? We don't know. For right now, we are in a watch and wait posture as we look for further signs of conflict in al-Fasher. But the past few days, we have seen no further major destruction.
Now, the RSF and the Sudanese army have both been accused of using food as a weapon of war. What evidence is there to support that?
In the case of al-Fasher itself, you have to understand that before the large-scale fighting began on May 10th in and around the city, there had not been a United Nations aid delivery of food and medical supplies since the middle of April. So already al-Fasher had been under a state of basically humanitarian blockade even before the fighting started inside the city. In the case of Sudan Armed Forces, they have blocked shipments through RSF territory from Chad, which has had catastrophic implications on the United Nations and other agencies being able to feed inside Darfur. Overall, we see Sudan heading towards what's called Integrated Phase Classification Level 5, otherwise known as famine. In the Zamzam camp in al-Fasher, as of April, 30% of the children there were in a state of what's called severe acute malnutrition, or SAM. And so we already had people dying from the fight in al-Fasher even before bullets were flying, simply due to lack of food.
Now, briefly, if you can, what impact can the international community really have in holding both sides to account for these war crimes?
To put it simply, the UN Security Council resolution is a first step, but only a first step. At this point, there has to be consequences for both RSF and SAF and their foreign backers, including UAE and Iran. It's a regional conflict and needs to be treated as such. And without consequences from the West, nothing is going to change.
Nathaniel, Raymond, Director at Yale's Humanitarian Research Lab, thank you very much for sharing your insights with us.
Thank you, sir.